Thank you, Neil. I'm going to make 3 points in my 5 minutes. One, a defense of the 10th Amendment and federalism, and I know we all agree on that. Why it's eroding, and what we should do about it. The 10th Amendment, and I'm speaking to the choir here more or less, but the 10th Amendment is put into the Constitution to do several things. One of the things it does, it protects against one-size-fits-all government. Solutions that spread all over the country may work in one place, but not another. The 10th Amendment and federalism allows states to experiment. 50 different experiments can be run to determine what policy approaches to drunk driving or driver's license and any number of things might work in that state. These states are laboratories of democracy, and states can look at one another and replicate successes and avoid failures. States can test these different approaches. It's a means by which federalism and the 10th Amendment, it's a means by which we can live together as the United States of America. So, for example, one state might object to a particular policy approach, and to have that imposed upon the state by the federal government makes it harder for us to live together. So by reserving to the federal government just those powers reserved to it in the Constitution, leaves the states, again, more able to live with one another. And this is, I think, one of the things most important to the framers, the founders of our country, the framers of our Constitution, their extremely perceptive knowledge of human behavior and the tendency to, if you concentrate power in any one hand, and we're at the point, as I mentioned before the session began, we are living in a much more complex world than that inhabited perhaps by the founders, the framers. Nonetheless, when you concentrate power in a small number of hands, even hands that are initially very well respected, esteemed, credentialed, you run the risk of that power becoming embedded and becoming tyranny. The framers were deeply, deeply suspicious about concentrating power, and therefore very careful about dividing power and assuring that it did not become concentrated. So these are some of the benefits of federalism, the 10th Amendment. And I know most of us agree on this. Now it's eroding of late for a variety of reasons, but I want to point out one major contributory cause of this erosion of the 10th Amendment, rights of states to determine their own affairs. And it's the money system, the political money system that we have in the United States, which has changed dramatically since the framers conceived of our Constitution, since it was formed. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. In New Hampshire, a guy named Mike Bloomberg, who lives in New York City, decided he wanted to change the legislature of the state of New Hampshire. He flooded our state with money, and he flipped in 2018 the control from Republicans to Democrats in both our state house and our state Senate because of his particular concerns about gun rights. He successfully did this by flooding the state, targeting money very, very carefully and specifically to swing legislative districts in our state. We can look at the election that just happened in Georgia. There's something like $200 million of so-called outside money. This is non-candidate money that went into the state of Georgia. And this is my warning about concentration, right? You heard 2018, New Hampshire, one person, Mike Bloomberg. This $200 million that flooded into the state of Georgia was controlled. The contributing sources might be large, but the control, the direction of this $200 million was in the hands of probably a dozen or 24 people, the leadership of the Senate on both parties, and wealthy people, and the residents of these people, the small number of people, a dozen or two who controlled that $200 million that went into Georgia. Those people live typically in places like New York State, New York City, California, and Washington, D.C. So we have this flood of outside money in this new campaign money system we've got, where local preferences on candidates, local issue priorities, the process by which local parties in our various states select and raise up candidates based on their history of doing good things in the states, all that is being subverted by this flood of outside money. And these people, this outside money from these 3 states and these 10 major metropolitan areas from which most of this money flows. And I'll send you links to this because I've done some research. You can use opensecrets.com and look at, or .org, and look at this yourself. This is eroding federalism. So what should we do about it? I'm on the board of an organization called American Promise. American Promise is focused on one thing: the passage of an amendment to the United States Constitution. Some people call it the 28th Amendment, to restore to the states and to the Congress the power. This is, and I use the word restore because this power existed before roughly 2010, to set limits on campaign money, both contributions and expenditures. And this amendment does not specify what Congress or the states would do with this power, this restored power to set these limits. So, for example, you might have a state like New Hampshire that might set a donor voter law in state so that money to support candidates in the state of New Hampshire would have to come from individuals, not unions, not corporations, who live in the state of New Hampshire. That might be an approach. The state of Montana might go back to what it had, where corporate money was banned. They didn't like Anaconda, the copper company running their state legislature 100 or so years ago. We'd like to restore to the state of Montana the power to do this. So what the states and what Congress might do with this power is yet to be determined. So one of the problems with this amendment, because American Promise is working on this amendment being drafted by Congress and then sent back to the states, the 38 states, for potential and hope for ratification. We hope to have this done by July 4th, 2026. Right now, it's very partisan. The bill in Congress is last session supported by every Democrat in both the House and Senate, and one Republican. So one of the things that I'm working on, and American Promise is working with me on this, is to link the term limits constitutional amendment, which is also stalled in Congress because it's heavily supported by Republicans and largely unsupported or opposed by Democrats, is to put them together into a grand bargain. So we'd have the term limits amendment and the campaign money amendment, restoring power to the Congress in the states to set limits, combined into one element, and hoping that Republicans and Democrats in Congress will unite and send that language back to the states for potential ratification, either linked together or separated into two questions. So that's what I'm about.